What's up guys, Doomwake here, and today we are going to be discussing the Pioneer ban list. We actually just did one of these for Modern not too long ago, so if you want to go ahead and check that out, I believe it was uploaded, I want to say as of the time of recording it was uploaded yesterday. I think I'm going to try to make this video go up on Friday, so definitely go check that out if you're interested in the Modern section. But today we are going to be discussing the Pioneer format. And what better way to kick off the Pioneer ban list with the first cards that were ever banned, and that is the fetch lands. Bloodstained Mire is on your screen, but we're going to go over all 5 of them because they are all in the LOL category. The entire premise of Pioneer is that fetch lands, they wanted a format to be balanced around not having fetch lands, and that's why you see cards like Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise are allowed to exist in this format because of the lack of fetch lands. And I really think that not only sans that, but it also just makes decks have significantly better mana. You see a lot of times in Modern where it's very easy to splash this, third or fourth color for leyline binding and things like that. It's almost effortless in Modern because you have fetch lands, shock lands, and triomes, and I think that you end up kind of doing the same thing to Pioneer if you let these loose, so probably for the best that they just stay banned. Next up, we have Walking Ballista. This card was mostly banned due to the presence of the Heliod combo at the time. This was around the format where Inverter of Truth was extremely popular, one of the most prevalent decks, and it was kind of like a dual decks, Inverter versus Heliod. Now, I think in the current iteration of Pioneer, if you were to just take the current format and make no other changes and put Ballista into it, it would be a problem because the Mono Green Devotion deck is one of the most powerful decks in the format. It has the capability of generating upwards of 15 mana on turn 3 or turn 4, and I think if you just take Walking Ballista and add it to that deck without taking that deck down a notch, it becomes a problem. However, I do think that in the current state of the format, I think Ballista Heliod would be okay. Maybe, they really have this vision of Pioneer where they really, and you could see this on the ban list, they really don't want combo decks, but combo players are always going to find a way to work a combo in. You see decks like Lotus Field currently exist, there are Creativity, which I guess you can argue that Creativity is kind of a combo deck that has a control deck that has a combo finish. But what I'm getting at is I think that if you were to make other changes to the format, sans take green down a notch, whether banning Karn or Nykthos or whatever, I think Heliod and Ballista could coexist. So I think for that reason, I'm going to put on the watch list, not quite unbanned with caution, because something would have to happen to green first. Next up is Underworld Breach. So to my knowledge, this card was mostly banned right around the first Pioneer PT. I think that at that time it was still called the Players Tour, and they had the PT in like 3 different locations. And I'm fairly certain, if I recall correctly, this card was in a Lotus Field deck that was incredibly dominant during that season or that particular Players Tour. Now, do you really want to make Lotus Field better? Probably not, because Lotus Field is a fairly obnoxious deck to play against. But I don't know. I mean, outside of Lotus Field, it's not really doing anything else. To my knowledge, I don't really think that there's a ton of other decks that can utilize this because you don't have as many of the graveyard tools that you have in Modern. So maybe if something were to happen to Lotus Field, I could see Underworld Breach maybe coming back. But again, I think it's in the same category as Ballista, where you'd have to have something else happen to the format first. Next up, we have Smugglers Chopper. Now, this might be a bit of a controversial take, but I actually think Smugglers Chopper would be kind of fine in Pioneer. The card was mostly banned due to the presence of the mono black aggro deck, and Smugglers Chopper was basically an automatic shoo-in 4 of in that deck. A lot of other decks did play it. It was a very prevalent piece of the format because it's just incredibly statted, right? 2 mana, it's 3/3, so it's overcosted there. The crew's only 1, it has flying, and then it loots on attack or block. The card is just extremely powerful, and I do think a lot of decks would play it. But I kind of think that you're helping the right people, because I guess with the exception of mono white aggro is probably the most prevalent aggressive deck, and then you could say Boros Convoke. P is not really an aggressive deck. Maybe aggressive decks could use a bit of a boost, and I think for that reason I'd be okay putting it, maybe not no issue, but unbanned with caution, because the issue there definitely is issue in banning a colorless card that's this cheap and this powerful, because a lot of decks would play it, and maybe that's not the best play experience when you're playing, every single deck plays Smugglers Chopper. But there are some decks that can't play it, and I think I would like to see what would happen if they unbanned it. Next up is Expressive Iteration. Now, I did a little bit of research on this one, and I wanted to look up the exact excerpt from it was the June 7, 2022 banned and restricted announcement. And I quote, "To lower the win rate of the wide variety of Izzet decks and bring them further in line with other strategies in the format while maintaining what makes them special in Pioneer, expressive iteration is banned." Now, this was banned at a time where Phoenix was essentially at its all-time high. This is the most represented, Phoenix deck that we had ever seen in the iteration of the Pioneer format, and people still play Phoenix to this day. I do kind of think that Phoenix could use a bit of a boost, and maybe this isn't the best way to go about doing that. We are getting the new cantrip. We're getting Sleight of Hand in the new Eldraine set, so that might be a boost to Phoenix. I think it will be. But I don't know, like, is this card that good in the creativity decks? They usually want to hold up their mana a lot to hold up counter spells and big scores and things of that nature, so the creativity decks would play it for sure. But I don't know. I think this actually might be boosting the right decks, like the decks that kind of could use a boost and maybe help overpower some of the other more obnoxious decks in the format. So, I don't know. I'm going to put it in the same tier as Smugglers Chopper. Again, probably a hot take. Let me know in the comments, but I think I'd be okay with it. Here we have Felidar Guardian. Now, this is kind of a tough one because I have a personal opinion on Felidar Guardian. But from their perspective, how they've explicitly stated in the past, and you can go look up some of the ban and restricted announcements and just the Pioneer format in general, they have said that I believe for the most part, they're not the biggest fan of combo decks because, I mean, if you look at Felidar Guardian, the combination with this is Saheeli Ray. So you go turn 3 Saheeli Ray, turn 4 Felidar Guardian, Saheeli, copy Felidar, blink Saheeli, and it's like a Splinter Twin thing where you make infinite 1/4s with haste. That combo is, one, pretty fragile because Fatal Push is a card that is legal in the format. So if the Rakdos deck has like Fable into hold up mana for Fatal Push with the treasure, then you can break that up. It also requires you to tap out on turn 3 and turn 4, with both plays not impacting the board in any meaningful way whatsoever. So from the perspective of would this be too good in the format? Probably not, and I think that I'd be interested in seeing it, but again, we're using their perspective and philosophy of that they don't want combo decks in the Pioneer format. Again, why is Lotus Field legal? But anyways, on that premise, they're probably never going to unban this, but I actually think I'd put it on the watch list, and I might be, kind of interested in seeing how the format would shake out with Felidar Guardian. Next up is Field of the Dead. Now, again, this was a different time of Pioneer where I believe we still had Uro. This might have been after the Oko ban. I'm pretty sure like Oko got banned very quickly. Uro lasted a little bit longer. And there were decks that played Uro and Field of the Dead. There was also kind of like this Scapeshift sort of ramp mid-range deck that was like a bunch of big mana and ramp spells like Arboreal Grazer, Cultivate, just like ways to put a bunch of lands into play. And then its big finish was Hour of Promise, which is a 5-mana card that lets you search for any 2 lands and put them onto the battlefield, not just basics. So you could Hour of Promise into, say, like Field of the Dead and a desert, and the Hour of Promise, would give you the zombies for having desert, so you would cast this 5-mana spell, make 4 2/2 zombies or whatever, and that was extremely powerful. But would that hold up in today's Pioneer format where you have, the Boros Convoke deck is trying to kill you on turn 3, Lotus Field's killing you on turn 3 or turn 4, you have like Rakdos midrange, which is playing a bunch of Thoughtseizes. I'm not sure that deck would hold up in today's Pioneer format, so this is kind of another watch list one for me. Again, there's a lot of cards on this ban list that were maybe banned at other times in the format where different things were going on, and I think just the Pioneer format has changed quite a bit since, the banning of these cards, and I'd like to see what happens with Field of the Dead off the ban list. All right. Under Cine Informer, and I'm going to put its partner in crime, Balustrade Spy, over here. I won't put Balustrade Spy on the screen, but it's basically the same exact card. It's just, instead of 3 mana and 1 to sacrifice, it's just a 4 mana 2/3 that mills your entire library. So the joke behind these cards and this particular archetype is Oops All Spells. Now, you see this a lot in Modern, where Oops All Spells and Belcher plays a whole bunch of MDFCs. Oops All Spells in particular tries to mill its entire deck. And that's exactly what happened in Pioneer when the MDFCs were released, and that's why these cards were banned. Now, we've talked about, kind of 2-card combos like Felidar Guardian plus Saheeli Ray. I guess you could call like Walking Ballista plus Heliod. There's a bunch of 2-card combos that maybe are not, they wouldn't necessarily be as powerful in today's Pioneer. You have to realize Undercity Informer and Balustrade Spy are 1-card combos, not 2-card combos. So I think 1-card combos at the power level that Pioneer is are probably a little bit too much, and I think I'm willing to put these in the LOL category. It's like, this is just 4 mana, you win the game. Now, granted, it does lose to a lot of graveyard hate. There's Leyland of the Void, Unlicensed, I guess maybe Hearse is not quite good enough because the whole graveyard gets milked, but you get the point. There's enough graveyard hate, but even then, 1-card combos that just win the game on the spot if unanswered, not the best. And next up, we have Inverter of Truth. Now, this is kind of a weird one because this one was banned during the time, and there's so many different articles and arguments on this, because when they banned it, they had mentioned, and I don't have an exact quote right in front of me, but when they banned it, they mentioned that the win rate of Inverter was somewhere around 49%, which, why would you ban a deck if it's winning less than half of its matches? But it was the most represented deck. It was all over the place in terms of metagame share, and a lot of people shared the sentiment that it was obnoxious to play against, which probably true. It wasn't the most fun play experience, but let's be honest, there's a lot of play experiences in current Pioneer that are also not that fun. Now, that's not an advocate for banning it. Oh, you wouldn't just say, well, there's actually a bunch of terrible things, so we can have this other terrible thing. The problem with Inverter is, remember how we just talked about 2-card combos and 1-card combos. 1-card combos being bad for the format, 2-card combos that are fragile being maybe okay for the format. Inverter is technically a 2-card combo, but the reality is it's kind of only like a 1-card combo, because a lot of times where you cast the Inverter of Truth, you have either Thassa's Oracle or Jace. You have 4 Inverter Truth, and then you have somewhere between 6 or 7 to 8 copies of your B part of your combo. But what a lot of people don't realize is this was just a control deck, and a lot of times the game was won by just casting Inverter and attacking 3 times, and that's it. You had enough cards in your graveyard that you wouldn't die after the Inverter trigger. So this is kind of a 1-card combo. I don't know. I think I'm going to put this in probably should rethink that category, just because, again, Pioneer's changed a lot. The play experiences have changed quite a bit, but I still think this one is closer. It's basically, the way that I look at it is it's closer to Undercity Informer than it is to Felidar Guardian for me, and for that reason, I think probably should rethink that. Next up, we have Kethis the Hidden Hand. Now, I wanted to kind of did a little bit of research on this one. Kethis was banned at the same time alongside Inverter of Truth, Underworld Breach, and Walking Ballista in the August 3rd bannings. I believe it was August 3rd, 2021, I think is the correct date. Now, look at that list. Inverter of Truth, Underworld Breach, Walking Ballista, Kethis. They clearly had a sentiment at the time that they did not want combo decks to exist in Pioneer. I'm having a little bit of a speech problem today. Fast forward to today. Mono Green Devotion. For whether or not you want to believe it, it's a combo deck. It's trying to set up Karn in Infinite Loop, one of the more powerful decks in the format. It's a combo deck. Lotus Field, it's a combo deck, one of the more powerful decks in the format. So even though they've tried their hardest to make Pioneer not about combo, people are always going to try and find combo decks. And I think Kethis is, for what it is, probably the single weakest card on any ban list combined between Modern and Pioneer. This card is, to be honest with you, it's not that good. The combo itself is decent, but there's a lot of stuff that hates against it. You kill the Kethis, you exile the graveyard, you play a taxing effect. There's plenty of things that stop it, and Kethis requires extreme deck building restrictions. You have to play, I think, somewhere in the realm of like 28 to 30 legendary cards just to support Kethis. I think this would be fine if it came off the ban list today. I'm going to go ahead and put it in unbanned today, no issue. People would try it, and it would be good, especially with some recent printings, specifically Rona. I think Rona would actually give the deck quite a bit of a boost, but I think it would be a net positive for the format overall. Okay, and here we get to Leyland of Abundance. This is kind of a weird one, because this was mostly banned due to the dominance of Mono Green Devotion. Sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Now, I think if you took current Pioneer and you just slapped Leyland of Abundance into the green deck, it would obviously be broken. It would be way too good if you take it in the current Pioneer deck. So I think I kind of want to put this in the same category as Ballista, where if you knock something down from Green Devotion, maybe you can reintroduce Leyline. And I think I'm willing to put this right around where the Ballista is, because I think it's almost feels like the exact same as Ballista to me. Now, Ballista would have other applications, as we talked about the Heliod deck, and Leyline would really only be good in mono green decks. But, you know, if something were to happen with green, I could see this card coming off and being good, but not too much of an issue. And here we have a card that we saw on the Modern Banlist episode, and that is Lurus of the Dream Den. What's kind of weird to me about the Lurus and Pioneer ban is I don't really think it was causing that much harm, or it was even that dominant during the time where it was banned. So, if I remember correctly, you had the Black-White Auras deck that played it, you had the Red-Black Arcanist deck that played it, and I think there were maybe some like Bring to Light control decks that tried it out. I'm sure the the Boros Burn deck was another good example. So there's definitely some decks that play it, but it wasn't like Lurus in Modern. The format completely warped around it because of the interaction between Lurus and Mishra's Bauble. That it just absurd draw engine that just gave you this like free, you know, Phyrexian Arena style effect every single turn. And we don't have that in Pioneer. There's no Mishra's Bauble. The best things that you can recur with this are 1-mana creatures, you know, maybe a Tormod's Crypt and some sort of weird fringe combo deck. So maybe a hot take, but I actually think that in Pioneer, you could unban Lurus today, and yes, people would play it, but I don't really think it would cause anyone harm. Like, it wouldn't ruin anybody's day, and I think it would be kind of fine. Again, probably controversial. Comment section down below, you know where to go, you know where you can find me, but I think Lurus would be okay. Alright, next up we have Nexus of Fate. Now, this card was mostly played in these kind of like blue-green taking turn fog decks, where the entire premise of the deck was to just stall, you know, with fogs and some other version of variations of fogs, and then get to a point where you would like just cast Nexus over and over and over again because it shuffles itself back into its library, take every single turn, and you know, eventually find a way to win from there. Shouldn't be too difficult once you have infinite turns. I don't know. This one is kind of tough because it is relatively expensive. You know, it does cost 7 mana. It is as far as the combo is concerned, it's a little difficult to set up. But, I don't know, the nature of going back to paper play and having to shuffle this over and over again, I mean, I don't know how much you want to weigh on there only being foil copies, and there was a big joke at the time of people having to use proxies because the foils were all warped. Maybe that shouldn't factor into the actual health of the card, and I don't think it does, but just wanted to bring that up. But, I don't know, I think this card, like, on power level alone, maybe is okay, although you can do some crazy stuff with another card that was banned on this list. Although, without Wilderness Reclamation, yeah, the more I think about it, honestly, without Wilderness Rec, this card could be okay. It's probably somewhere between, like, Unban with Caution and Watch List for me. I think I'll keep it on the Watch List because it's, like, more of an obnoxious card than the other cards in the Unban with Caution, but I don't know. Without Wilderness Rec, probably okay. Well, if we thought Oko was too good for Modern, it certainly is too good for Pioneer. LOL tier. We don't need to have much of a discussion here. Let's move on. And I think we're probably not going to have much of a discussion with Once Upon a Time as well. I mean, I guess there's maybe slightly more of an argument here, but it's a free cantrip. It doesn't really help the right people, as in the decks that, you know, are just combo decks that don't really need help. So, LOL tier, next. Wilderness Reclamation is up next. Now, we talked about Wilderness Reclamation in combination with Nexus of Fate. This card was exceptionally powerful, and those were kind of the two cards that were seen most often together, and I want to say they got banned right around the same time. But yeah, Wilderness Reclamation is just kind of a busted card. Like, it got banned at Standard for basically the same reasons. People were just doing abusive stuff with it. And I don't know, this is one of those where maybe you could unban it and it potentially wouldn't cause too much harm, or not necessarily too much harm, but a lot of people maybe wouldn't play it. But it's one of those, like, why would you kind of things, because this is one of those cards where if this deck is too good, it's broken. Like, there is it's just completely absurd how good the deck is when this deck is good, and for all intents and purposes, I think it's probably best to leave it. Probably should rethink that, maybe in the same vein as Inverter of Truth, but yeah, I think this one should probably stay on the ban list. We have everybody's favorite card of all time, Teferi the Fun Raveler. Oh boy, do I not miss this card. Just from play experience alone and the amount of things that it just randomly hoses for no apparent reason, not only do I think this should be LOL, maybe I should make a category in this particular format for Teferi on its own. This card should just, like, I don't know. You get it. LOL to LOL category. Let's move on. Next up, we have the Titan, Uro Titan of Nature's Wrath. Now, this one was banned. I want to say the deck that was using this, and obviously there were a bunch of decks utilizing Uro at that time, but the deck that was utilizing it the most was the Sultai mid-range deck, right around that Players Tour that happened with Inverter of Truth and the Underworld Breach stuff. And I don't know. I mean, this card is exceptionally powerful, but there is no fetch lands, right? And maybe that is a lot of what people use as for arguments to why this card could come off. I don't think it should. I think this card is exceptionally powerful. Even without fetch lands, there are just plenty of cheap ways to put cards into your graveyard, Considers and, you know, Jace looting. There's plenty Fabled Passage. There's plenty of things you can do to put cards in your graveyard if are legal. So I'm gonna do probably should rethink that. I don't think it's quite in the same category as like Oko and things of this nature, but you know, again, it's one of those things. Probably should rethink that. Better left on the ban list. A lot of people maybe forgot that Veil of Summer was on the Pioneer ban list, but yeah, it's on the ban list. Now, this is a weird one for me because, to be honest with you, Veil of Summer, like, kind of does punish the right people, sort of. Like, the Thoughtseize decks maybe need to be kept in check a little bit. The Counterspell decks, although Counterspell decks aren't really that good. The problem with the Counterspell decks is the Counterspells themselves aren't even that good in Pioneer. So this card would mostly be used as a defensive tool against Rakdos midrange when they try to Thoughtseize you or things like that. I mean, Veil of Summer just as a card is, you know, a pretty toxic design. It's the most, like, one of the most powerful one-for-ones they've ever printed. It's just, when it goes off, it's a one-mana Cryptic command, and that's exceptionally powerful. Now, I think during the time, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was banned, like, sort of right around the time when it got banned in Standard, or maybe shortly thereafter, where they just kind of wanted to, like, clean up the mess, as it were, with Veil of Summer. I don't know. I mean, it is a sideboard card. People wouldn't main deck this. I think LD probably should rethink that. You know, maybe closer to watch list, but it's like, I don't know. If Thoughtseize ever becomes too much of a problem, which maybe you can argue that it already is, then maybe this card punishes the right people, but probably should keep it on the ban list. Just, it's a tough one for me, but we'll keep it on the ban list for now. And last, but certainly not least, Winona, Joiner of Forces. I think a lot of people want to compare this to a 4-mana Greasefang, but it is much more powerful than Greasefang. Greasefang, you know, I've won several games where I've taken a hit from Parhelion, either untapped and killed my opponent, or maybe untapped and dealt with the Angels and was able to stabilize from there. With Winona, there is no stabilizing. If the Winona attack goes through, you will die on the spot that turn. There's no untapping. You're dead on the spot. And I think that just puts kind of an unnecessary pressure on the format. To the removal spells that you have to play when Winona is legal, you cannot play Fiery Impulse, you cannot play cards that deal 2 damage, you have to play stuff like Lightning Axe, Fatal Push. You know, we might even see people start main decking Ray of Enfeeblement because it kills a Llanowar Elf, but it also kills a Winona. And do you really want people to be playing a format where they feel forced into main decking a Rending Volley and Ray of Enfeeblement? No. So for that reason alone, because the removal spells aren't as good as they are in Modern, I think we have to keep this on the ban list, probably, and should rethink that category. You do not want to live in a world where people need to respect Winona, because the format just gets degenerate extremely quickly. And there we have it, folks. The best and completely non-biased Pioneer unbanned tier list that you have or will ever see. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below how badly I did, what cards would you like to see unbanned, and until next time, adios.